Hey y'all, it's Sally, and today I'm coming at you with a full series review of the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han. I just read these books last week and I flew through all of them in like 4 days, and I have so many feelings about them and what happens in them, and I just really wanted to share. This is not the first time I have attempted this series. So when I was probably a sophomore in high school, I read To All the Boys I've Loved Before, the first book in the series, and I didn't like it. I almost never DNF series. Like, if I start a book and I finish the first book, I will read the whole series, but I could not care less after reading this book the first time. However, the movie came out last summer and I watched the movie and am obsessed with it. So I decided to give them another go, and this past week I've been devouring them and I'm finally done. This is going to be full of spoilers, so if you haven't read them and you don't want spoilers, click off now. The basic plot of the story is that Lara Jean Song-Covey, who's half Korean and half white, lives with her dad and her 2 sisters, Kitty, her younger sister, and Margot, her older sister. Lara Jean is in love with her sister's boyfriend Josh, who lives next door to them, but obviously she can't say that because he's dating her sister. So Lara Jean writes love letters to every boy she's ever loved when she loves them, as a way to say goodbye, I am getting my feelings off my chest, and then she puts them away and hopes they never see them. But Lara Jean's letters get sent out by her younger sister and chaos ensues. So that's the basic framework. The inciting incident of the whole series is about Lara Jean's love letters getting sent out. Let's start with the first book in the series, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. One of the things I didn't like the first time I read this book was Lara Jean's voice. I found her kind of annoying and childish, and I didn't want to read 2 more books where I was with this narrator. Even though I liked Lara Jean, I didn't like reading from her perspective, and this time around that was still true for this book, for the first one. I did find Lara Jean to be kind of whiny, and there were things about her that I didn't find to really be believable as a character. But I also know that one of Lara Jean's main characteristics is that she has a lack of experience in the romance department, and that she's a very sheltered person. So it does make sense for the character, and it definitely serves the character. It just wasn't my favorite. The first time I read this book, I did not like Margot at all. And then I watched the movie and I still did not like Margot at all. And this third time reading this book, I did not like Margot at all. She is really, really harsh on Lara Jean unnecessarily, and that she's very critical of the things her sister does solely because her sister's different than she is, and she doesn't really take the time to appreciate that Lara Jean's her own person, and she just kind of wants to control her and be in control of the household. And I found that really frustrating and annoying. I wanted to like pull my hair out sometimes. I was like, Margot, shut up. Another thing I don't super love about Margot's characterization in this story is that she's seen as this strong, unbreakable force only because she doesn't feel comfortable being vulnerable, and she doesn't show her feelings very much. And I get why people think that that means she's strong, but I think it's about time that we start reading and writing YA in which characters who do cry a lot and who are vulnerable and who feel comfortable being upfront about their feelings are also seen as strong. I think Lara Jean is incredibly strong in this series, even though she does cry quite a few times and she doesn't always know how to handle her feelings. I think it's incredible that we get to see a character work through her feelings so fully, and so I think that the idea that strong characters are the characters who never grapple with their feelings is incorrect, and I think that Margot actually, that's a weakness of hers, and it should be seen as such instead of a strength. And the third Song-Covey girl is Kitty, or Catherine. I love Kitty so much. She might be my favorite character in the entire series. She is so wonderful and goofy and wild. I'm pretty sure it was Anna Cathcart who played her in the movie, and she did such a wonderful job. I think that her character stayed the truest in the movies to what was written in the books. She is a preteen, and she is so a preteen. Another character in the series is Chris, who is Lara Jean's flighty but caring best friend. I think Chris is a really interesting character, especially in comparison to Lara Jean, because Chris is kind of the exact opposite of Lara Jean. In this first book, Lara Jean is really judgmental of Chris and the way that she hooks up with guys who she doesn't intend to have relationships with, and she has sex when she wants to have sex. And I didn't really appreciate Lara Jean's judgment of her so much, because it felt a little bit slut-shamey to me. I think it's really cool that Jenny Han wrote a complex character who has sex with boys in school and who's really open about her sex life. But I just wish that Lara Jean in this book didn't judge her as much for doing that, because she can do what she wants. Just like Lara Jean can not do what she doesn't want to do, Chris can do what she does want to do. Now let's talk about the boys. So we have two main love interests in this first book, Josh Sanderson and Peter Kavinsky. Josh Sanderson is Lara Jean's next door neighbor and Margot's boyfriend at the beginning of the story. However, pretty soon into the book, Margot breaks up with Josh because she's going off to college in Scotland and doesn't want to go to college with a boyfriend. That leaves Lara Jean in a tricky spot. She's had feelings for Josh for a really long time, and now that Margot's gone, it's even harder for her to deny the fact that she has feelings for him. And then her letters get sent out. And the first person to let her know that they have her letter is Peter Kavinsky, who's the most popular guy at school. He's on the lacrosse team, he's super cute, and he's deep in a relationship with Lara Jean's ex-best friend. One of the things I really like about all of the love interests in this whole series is that they're all flawed, but they're all inherently really caring. Josh, Peter Kay, and then later on in the series, John Ambrose, all really want the best for Lara Jean and for her sisters, and I find that so endearing and really wonderful for young girls to read. Another thing I found a little bit troubling was Lara Jean's possessive language about Josh. She says in the book that Josh belonged to her first because he was friends with her first, or that Josh belongs to Margot because Margot's dating him, and Josh doesn't belong to anyone because he's a human being, and as a human being you can't belong to anyone. So I was a little frustrated with that kind of possessive language, but once again throughout the series she develops so much and she starts to really think of all the boys as individual complex human beings, and I thought that was really cool to see. After Lara Jean's letters get sent out, she and Peter decide to start up a fake relationship so that Peter can make his ex-girlfriend Jen jealous, and so that Lara Jean can make sure that Josh doesn't think that she still likes him. So their fake relationship starts with Peter Kay kissing Lara Jean in front of everyone to make everyone realize that they are a couple. Later that day, Lara Jean decides she wants to make a contract with Peter Kay to make sure that the rules about their relationship are clear and that no boundaries are crossed during their fake relationship. First of all, I think it's fantastic that there's such a clear scene where two people, even though they are in a fake relationship, discuss their boundaries and what they're comfortable and not comfortable with. And I think that that should be a super normalized thing, because it's really important to discuss boundaries and to talk about the things that we're ready for or not ready for. But in this scene, Lara Jean tells Peter Kay that she doesn't want him to kiss her anymore. And Peter Kay apologizes so fast. He's like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to steal your first kiss, I didn't want to make you uncomfortable," and like, I was swooning. He also doesn't tell anyone about the letter. Like, he could so easily just like make fun of Lara Jean and embarrass her in front of the whole school and tell everybody about this letter, but he doesn't. He keeps it to himself, and it's never his intention to embarrass her. One thing that I really don't like about Josh is that he shit talks Peter. Like, he talks mad trash about Peter while he believes that Lara Jean and Peter are dating, which is just a really shitty thing to do. Like, I get you don't like him and you're jealous of him because you're all of a sudden in love with Lara Jean or whatever, but like, if you believe somebody's dating somebody, you don't just go up to them and start talking shit about their boyfriend. He literally just doesn't like Peter because he's a jock. Once Margot finds out that Lara Jean and Peter are dating, she does the same thing, like her sister. And I'm like, okay, look, first of all, none of y'all know Peter Kay. He's a sweet, precious baby. And second of all, that is not something you do to somebody you care about. Garbage. Did not enjoy that. I was like, Josh, shut up and go back to your house. Stay in your lane. You don't belong here. You already got one song, girl. You don't need another. Another reason that I want Josh Sanderson to leave forever is something that they cut out of the movie, but in the book, Josh kisses Lara Jean. Josh kisses her when they're having a long discussion about like whether Lara Jean still likes him and whatnot, and he just goes and kisses her to like prove a point, to be like, hey, you don't know how I really feel about you, maybe I do like you. And that's when he believes that Lara Jean and Peter are dating. So he just like goes and kisses her even though she's dating somebody else without her consent. And I was like, oh, if you could please get the frick out of here right now, I would really appreciate it. That made me so angry. I'm really glad they cut it out of the movie, because I don't think Josh is a bad person by any means, but like that made me really angry. And I thought it was, I didn't understand how she could just so easily like be friends with him again after that had happened. So I didn't love that. Okay. I have to put the book down for a second because here it is time to discuss the hot tub scene. It's infamous. It's glorious. In the movie, it's steamy. It's fantastic. So the school goes on a ski trip, which is like it's infamous at their school for being where a lot of kids like have sex for the first time or like hook up with people, and Lara Jean really doesn't want to go at first because she's not ready for that kind of thing, but Peter's like, you have to go with me, we don't have to do anything, but it's gonna look crazy if I go and my girlfriend's not there. So Lara Jean goes, and there's like some drama with Peter because she doesn't sit with him on the bus and he gets really upset about that. Then Lara Jean goes outside to see if Peter's waiting for her in the hot tub. I'm just not okay. So Lara Jean is like apologizing for not sitting with Peter on the bus, and Peter's apologizing for like ignoring her on the ski slope, and they're just kind of talking about the stuff that's been bothering them in their fake relationship. Then Lara Jean gets in the hot tub with her nightgown on, and she like swims over to Peter and they start kissing, and it's like so cute. And as soon as they start kissing, Peter asks Lara Jean if she's okay, because he knows that in their contract and in their discussion, Lara Jean said she didn't want to kiss him because their relationship wasn't real. And I just love that Peter Kay makes sure that she's okay and makes sure that he has her consent before he continues on with anything. And Lara Jean's like, yeah, I'm fine, let's do the dang thing. So Lara Jean, who has like no experience with like physical intimacy, I love that in this scene she starts like instructing Peter on what to do. So she talks about like the way Peter looks at her makes her know that he would do anything she asked for, and that that's a weird feeling for her, which I really like, that like Jenny Han goes into that kind of place of power when you're first being physical with somebody. I think that's a really interesting dynamic that she includes in the books. But then Lara Jean instructs Peter, so she's like, touch my hair again, I liked that. And I really like that there's this scene where these two characters are like making out and they're being really communicative with each other and making sure each other's okay, and like saying, hey, I liked that, like do that again. I think that's a really healthy way to talk about physical intimacy and sex, even though they don't have sex, but like I think that's a really great way to talk about it. And so when young people are reading it, they're gonna be like, oh, it's okay for me to like be open and communicative about it. It doesn't have to be like this silent like thing where we read each other's minds, because that's not what it is. So I really appreciate the way that Jenny Han talks about it. I think that that's so cool, and I just love that. That tickled me. That made me so happy. So after the hot tub scene, already there's a rumor going around that PK and Lara Jean had sex in the hot tub, which they didn't, and Chris immediately asks Lara Jean if she's okay. She's really caring and she's understanding of Lara Jean in that moment. I think that's really good development for Chris, because Chris has been kind of flighty and aloof throughout the book, and so you really see then that she shows up for Lara Jean when she needs to. After the hot tub scene, Lara Jean finds out that Peter Kay had gone to Genevieve's room after he and Lara Jean had made out in the hot tub, which understandably makes Lara Jean really upset, and she calls everything off with Peter. Lara Jean starts to really miss him. So at the end of the book, she starts writing him a love letter. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars, and one thing I really do like about this series is that they move right into each other so easily. So, P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han is the second book in the series. We find out at the beginning of the book that Lara Jean and Peter Kay are giving it another shot, but this time for real. And they make a new contract for their new relationship, which I love because they're still talking about boundaries and being really communicative and open with each other, which I think for young people reading this series is so important. However, things don't stay perfect for long. After a while, Lara Jean gets a letter from John Ambrose McLaren, who is one of the other 5 boys that she sent a love letter to. John Ambrose sends Lara Jean a letter back, and they quickly become pen pals. So in this book, we also see Lara Jean start to volunteer at a nursing home, and she has a really good friend at the nursing home named Stormy, who it turns out is John Ambrose's grandmother or great-grandmother, something like that. And John Ambrose comes to a party that Lara Jean throws at the nursing home, and that night Lara Jean and John Ambrose are dancing and flirting a little bit, and then Peter shows up at the nursing home, and he and Lara Jean break it off right there because Peter's upset, and Lara Jean's upset because Peter's with Jen, and it's just a whole mess. And so then that night John Ambrose and Lara Jean kiss. Also involved is a game of assassins. Lara Jean and Peter and Genevieve and John Ambrose and Chris, and then 2 other guys from their old friend group decide to play a game of assassins together, and whoever wins gets whatever wish they want granted to them. I really like that they're playing assassins throughout this book. It's part of the reason I flew through this book so fast. That is the basic plot of this book, and some of my feelings are as follows. One of the scenes that I really loved in this book was Lara Jean and Margot have a discussion about sex. Margot tells Lara Jean to be really careful and to make sure that whoever she has sex with for the first time is gentle with her and kind. I just think it was a really nice conversation between sisters, where you really see that Margot does care about Lara Jean and she wants what's best for her. So I appreciated that scene. I thought that was really nice. So a little bit later in the book, Chris and Margot and Lara Jean are all in Lara Jean's room talking about the hot tub video that has now surfaced. So there's a video of Lara Jean and Peter Kay making out in the hot tub that makes it look like they're having sex, and the whole school has seen it, and Lara Jean's understandably freaking out about it. So she and Chris and Margot are talking about that, and Chris calls Lara Jean out on her slut shaming, and I think that's really cool. At one point, like, Lara Jean says something like, you know, just because you have this reputation or whatever doesn't mean I want to, and Chris is like, dude, I can do what I want, and that's not cool of you for calling me out on that. And Lara Jean really hears her and like takes that in. Also in the scene, they have this huge conversation about the double standards in sex, and I think that's really awesome. They talk about how Peter's gonna get a bunch of congratulations for this video where he's making out with Lara Jean, and Lara Jean's only gonna get shamed for it, and they talk about why that's the case, and I thought that was a really great scene. And I was just like, yes, crush the patriarchy. Like, do we need men? Not even a little bit. I also really like the fact that Kitty's comfortable asking questions with her sisters. So she asks questions about sex throughout the book, and even though she's really young, you know, the sisters are really understanding and open with her, and I think that's the kind of narrative about sex that we need to cultivate in order to combat things like rape culture, because now Kitty's gonna grow up understanding that, you know, what she needs is valid and she can say no and all these kinds of things. So I think it's really great that even at a young age they're talking about sex in an open and honest way. There's a scene where Lara Jean and Peter are making out, and Lara Jean is caught between this wanting to go slow because she's scared and inexperienced and doesn't feel ready, but also the frenzy and passion and excitement of being able to make out with Peter and be with a boy that she loves. And I think that that's a really interesting dynamic, and I like that Jenny Han plays with the dichotomy of that feeling of physical intimacy, especially when it's new, and the way that Lara Jean is scared but excited and she doesn't really know what to do, I think is a really good scene. So one thing that I think throughout the entire series is really clear is that Lara Jean's navigating her firsts and she doesn't always know what decision to make. Towards the end of the book, there is a scene in which Lara Jean and Peter are in a treehouse that they used to be in all the time when they're little, and Lara Jean is super upfront with Peter and lets him know that she's not ready to have sex with him yet, and he's so understanding and he's fine with that. But he does admit that he wants to have sex with her. And so I really like this scene because Lara Jean's like, do you want to have sex? And Peter's like, yeah, I do, but I'm not gonna pressure you. And it's not like Peter's like, no, I don't want to have sex until you're ready. It's like, yeah, I do, but I'm not gonna pressure you, and like, you don't need to worry about it. Like, I'll deal with it on my own. John Ambrose McLaren is a freaking bean. I love him so much. And let me tell you, like, I'm a Peter K stan. Like, I will love Peter till the end. But John Ambrose is also so well written, and I like the differences between the two boys. I like that John Ambrose McLaren is safe for Lara Jean, and Lara Jean feels really comfortable with him, and Peter is a little bit more exciting. And while Lara Jean is scared of a lot with Peter Kay, she's also really passionate about him, and I think that that's a really interesting, like, double layer to see her trying to grapple with and, like, understand within herself. I really appreciate that, and I just think John Ambrose is so well written. I cannot wait to see him in the movies and to dive into that even more. There was a moment in this book where I started sobbing. Like, I did not expect for these books to make me cry like a baby, but oh boy did they. So in this one, Lara Jean is on the porch with Peter, and she finds out that when she went out to find Peter in the hot tub, he was actually waiting for Jen, and oh my god, I was wrecked. I was like, this is absolutely unacceptable for Jenny Han to do. I do not appreciate it. I was so annoyed. I was like, how dare you? One of the greatest quotes in YA I've ever read is when Lara Jean says, "Why did God give me a mouth if I'm just gonna say dumb stuff with it?" I feel attacked. Honestly, I feel victimized, attacked. I don't even know what to do with it. That's all I have to say about that. Overall, I loved this sequel to All the Boys I've Loved Before. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It made me cry, it made me laugh. I read it like till 4 in the morning because I couldn't put it down, and then I immediately started the next one. And finally, we have Always and Forever Lara Jean. This is the conclusion to the series, and oh boy did it wreck my soul. This book focuses a lot more on Lara Jean's college and whether she is getting into college and where she's gonna go and how that relates to her relationship with Peter Kavinsky, and I think that it is done so incredibly well, especially because a lot of this book rang very true for me. One of the things I really love about the entire series is the way the representation is done so subtly. The Song Girls couldn't be the Song Girls if they weren't half Korean, and you really get to see moments of that throughout the book, and you get to see moments of them really connecting with their culture, and I think that's really interesting. But by far my favorite example of this is a scene where Lara Jean and Kitty are talking about whether their dad will end up having a baby with their soon-to-be stepmom Trina, and they talk about having a sibling who doesn't look like them, and they wonder how their dad will feel about having a kid who people immediately recognize as his own instead of wondering if he's really their parent. And I just think that the scene is so beautifully done. I was like aching for these girls. However, also in the scene, Lara Jean worries that if they have a boy, her dad is not sporty enough to raise a boy. And I was just like, okay, Lara Jean, I get that you are like the most stereotypically girly girl ever, and that's like fine and dope, whatever, but gender stereotypes are dumb, and like your dad could raise a hell of a man. So I was a little bit frustrated at the way she like stereotyped her own dad and talked about like, oh, I was worried he won't be able to raise a boy because he doesn't know how to play sports. I was like, and next, a moment occurred in this book, and my soul escaped from my body, and I was like, why is Peter Kavinsky not a real man? And that is when Lara Jean thinks about what if she got pregnant, and even though she and Peter haven't had sex, like she was just thinking about like, what if I got pregnant as a teenager? And she says, Peter, what would you do if I got pregnant? And he's like, it's your body. I would support you on whatever decision you made. I did not survive. Throughout most of this book, Lara Jean has decided that she's gonna go to William and Mary for a year and then transfer to UVA so that she can be with Peter. But then she finds out that she got off the waitlist and she got into UNC. And she's never really considered UNC as a possibility because it's far from home and it's in a different state, and she's never visited it. So Chris calls her up and says that she's going to take her to UNC. They drive all the way to North Carolina and they visit the campus, and Lara Jean instantly falls in love with it. And one of the things I really appreciate about this is that Lara Jean makes the decision in that moment that she's going to go to UNC. She talks to Peter later about it, but she doesn't let him make her decision. She decides that she deserves a shot at being as happy as she possibly can be at this other school. And while Peter's really sad about it, he's supportive of her, and you know, he says that she deserves to go there and that he's excited for her. So after Lara Jean decides she's going to UNC, we see a prom scene, which is short but sweet. After prom, they have graduation, and then after graduation, they have beach week. And during beach week, we really see Lara Jean and Peter start to drift apart, and I think Jenny Han wrote it so well. She wrote them drifting and not knowing how to say goodbye to each other and not knowing how to communicate in the wake of realizing they're going to be long distance really beautifully. I loved it so much. It felt very real. It made me sob like a baby. Throughout the book, Lara Jean's been bugging Peter to write in her yearbook the whole time, and Peter doesn't know what to say. And at the end of the book, Lara Jean goes and sees her yearbook, and he's written a contract on the yearbook, and it's a new contract for them about how their long distance relationship is gonna go, and I started bawling. I was like, oh my god, I love him so much. I was crying so hard in my bed. I was like, I don't even know how to handle this. It was everything to me. I really appreciate that at the end of the book they decide to try, and they have this conversation in which they basically say, you know, maybe we won't work out, but maybe we will, and why not give each other a shot at joy? And it's really well done, and obviously we don't know what happens with them. It ends at that. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars as well. It wrecked me and my entire soul, and I wasn't really ready to say goodbye to Lara Jean. So overall, I really loved the series. I can definitely see myself rereading it, and I can't wait for the other movies to come out. I think that Jenny Han's a wonderful writer, and I can't wait to go and read some more of her books, as these are the only ones I've checked out so far. So that's it for this video. I will see you next time. Okay, bye!